By year 10, something incredible happened. Hello there, my friend. Let me ask you something. Do you know what the difference is between a loyal employee and a doormat? About 30 years and a pink slip. But seriously, if you're someone who believes that loyalty should be rewarded, not punished, then hit that subscribe button because today's story will make you believe in justice again. Now, let me take you back to 1987. Picture this. A young man, fresh out of college, walking through the glass doors of Sterling Industries with stars in his eyes and a briefcase that cost more than his monthly rent. That young man was me, and I thought I was about to conquer the world. Little did I know, the world had very different plans for me. Sterling Industries wasn't just any company. They were the giants of industrial equipment manufacturing, the kind of place where handshake deals were worth millions and where your word was your bond. At least, that's what I believed when I signed my contract. The CEO, William Sterling, was this larger-than-life figure who could command a room just by walking into it. During my interview, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Son, if you give us your best years, we'll make sure your golden years are truly golden." I believed every single word. For the first 5 years, I was like a machine. 60-hour weeks were normal, 70-hour weeks were expected, and I never complained. Not once. While my college friends were out partying and dating, I was in the office, learning everything there was to know about industrial manufacturing. I studied supplier chains like they were poetry, memorized client preferences like they were family birthdays, and treated every contract like it was a masterpiece I was painting. Brought in Sterling Industries' biggest client ever, a massive government contract worth $47 million. The celebration party lasted until 3 in the morning, and William Sterling himself stood up and toasted me in front of the entire company. "This young man," he said, pointing at me with his champagne glass, "is the future of Sterling Industries." The future of Sterling Industries. Those words rang in my ears for months. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. Success, I learned, doesn't just bring rewards. It brings enemies. And sometimes, those enemies are sitting right next to you in the boardroom. There was this guy, David Harrison, the VP of Sales. He had been with the company for 15 years and had always been William's golden boy until I came along. David had the kind of smile that never reached his eyes and a handshake that felt like holding a dead fish. After my big win, David started what I can only describe as a systematic campaign to undermine everything I did. He would schedule client meetings without inviting me, then blame me when things went wrong because I wasn't there. He would forget to include me in email chains about projects I was leading. And worst of all, he started spreading rumors about me cutting corners to land that government contract. Now, you might be thinking, why didn't I go to William Sterling directly? But David was clever. He never did anything that left fingerprints. It was all subtle sabotage, the kind that makes you look paranoid if you complain about it. And William, bless his heart, was getting older and starting to rely more heavily on his senior management team to handle the day-to-day operations. By year 15 of my career at Sterling Industries, I had survived David's attempts to destroy me and had actually thrived despite them. I had brought in over $200 million in contracts, had built relationships with clients that were stronger than family bonds, and had trained half the sales team. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was part of the foundation that the company was built on. Or so I thought. The beginning of the end came on a Tuesday morning in March 2002. I remember it perfectly because it was the day after my daughter's birthday party, and I still had cake frosting under my fingernails when I walked into the office. There was an envelope on my desk, plain white, no company letterhead, just my name written in block letters. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a meeting request. Conference Room B, 3 p.m., regarding your future with Sterling Industries. No signature, no explanation, just those 8 words that would change everything. I spent the entire day trying to figure out what this meeting could be about. Maybe they were finally going to make me a partner. Maybe there was a promotion in the works. Maybe they wanted to discuss my retirement package. After all, I was 52 and had been thinking about scaling back in a few years. 3 o'clock came, and I walked into Conference Room B with a smile on my face. That smile lasted exactly 12 seconds. Sitting around the table were William Sterling, David Harrison, the company's lawyer, and someone from HR I had never seen before. The atmosphere was so cold I could practically see my breath. "Please, sit down," William said, and his voice had none of the warmth I had grown accustomed to over 15 years. This wasn't the man who had toasted me at that celebration. This was a stranger wearing William Sterling's face. David opened a folder and started reading from what was obviously a prepared script. After careful consideration and evaluation of our company's future needs, the board has decided to restructure our sales division. As part of this restructuring, we are offering you an early retirement package. Early retirement package. The words hit me like a freight train. I looked around the room, waiting for someone to say, "Just kidding," or "Gotcha," or something that would make this make sense. But everyone was staring at me with the kind of blank expressions you see at funerals. "I'm sorry," I said, and my voice sounded strange in my own ears. "Are you firing me?" "We prefer to call it a mutual separation with benefits," the HR person said in that artificially cheerful voice that people use when they're delivering terrible news. "You'll receive 18 months of salary, continuation of your health benefits for 2 years, and a very generous pension package that you can access immediately instead of waiting until 65. I looked directly at William Sterling. This man who had been like a father to me, who had promised me golden years, who had built his company's success on my back for 15 years. "William," I said quietly, "is this really how you want to do this?" For just a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe? Or guilt? But then David cleared his throat and the moment was gone. "The decision is final," William said, looking down at his hands instead of at me. "We think this is what's best for everyone involved." What's best for everyone involved? I had given them 15 years of my life, missed countless family dinners, worked through holidays, sacrificed my health and my relationships, and they thought pushing me out the door with a severance check was what's best for everyone involved. But here's the thing about being cornered. It brings out sides of you that you never knew existed. As I sat in that conference room, listening to them talk about transition periods and non-compete clauses and pension calculations, something inside me shifted. The loyal employee died in that moment, and someone entirely different was born. I stood up calmly, straightened my tie, and looked each person in the room directly in the eye. "I have one question," I said. "How long do I have?" 2 weeks, David said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. He had finally won. "Perfect," I said, and I meant it. "That's exactly what I need." Those 2 weeks were the most productive 14 days of my entire career, though not in the way Sterling Industries expected. While they thought I was wrapping up loose ends and saying goodbye to clients, I was actually conducting the most thorough audit of their business that had ever been done. You see, 15 years of loyalty had given me access to everything. I knew their supplier contracts down to the penny. I knew which clients were unhappy and why. I knew where they were vulnerable, where they were overcharging, where they were cutting corners, and most importantly, where they were about to lose money. I also knew something else. I knew that David Harrison had been skimming money from expense accounts for years. Not huge amounts, just enough to fly under the radar. A few hundred here, a few thousand there. But over the course of several years, it added up to serious money. And I had copies of everything. On my last day, I walked into William Sterling's office and placed a thick folder on his desk. "What's this?" he asked, looking suspicious. "My gift to the company," I said. "Evidence that David Harrison has been stealing from you for the past 6 years. The total amount is just over $300,000. The documentation is all there, receipts, bank records, forged signatures. Everything you need to send him to prison." William's face went white as he opened the folder and started reading. After a few minutes, he looked up at me with an expression I'll never forget. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because despite what you did to me, I'm not like you," I said. "I keep my word. I promised you 15 years of loyalty, and that promise doesn't end just because you broke yours." I turned to leave, but William called my name. "Wait," he said. "If you had this information, why didn't you use it to save your job?" I looked back at him one last time. "Because I have something better than job security now, William. I have motivation." And with that, I walked out of Sterling Industries forever. Or so everyone thought. The severance package they gave me was generous. I'll give them credit for that. 18 months of salary plus the early pension gave me enough money to live comfortably for several years without working. But living comfortably was never the plan. Not anymore. The first thing I did was something that probably sounds crazy. I enrolled in business school. At 52 years old, I became a full-time MBA student, focusing on finance and strategic management. My classmates were young enough to be my children, but I had something they didn't have: real-world experience and a burning desire to prove something. The professors loved me. While other students were learning about business theory from textbooks, I was sharing stories from the trenches. I aced every class, not because I was smarter than everyone else, but because I was more motivated than everyone else. Every late night spent studying was fueled by the memory of that conference room and the look on David Harrison's face when he thought he had won. During my second year of business school, something interesting happened. I was approached by a venture capital firm that had heard about my background and my academic performance. They offered me a position as an investment analyst, specializing in industrial manufacturing companies. It was perfect. Not only would I be back in my element, but I would be learning about the investment side of business, something I had never been exposed to at Sterling Industries. For the next 3 years, I absorbed everything I could about private equity, leveraged buyouts, market analysis, and company valuations. But more importantly, I was watching Sterling Industries from afar. And what I saw was fascinating. Without me there to bring in new clients and maintain relationships with existing ones, their sales started to decline. Not dramatically at first, just a steady erosion that William probably dismissed as a temporary market adjustment. David Harrison, now the head of sales, was good at office politics but terrible at actually selling. The clients I had cultivated for 15 years started to drift away, looking for someone who understood their needs the way I had. By 2008, Sterling Industries was in serious trouble. The financial crisis hit them harder than it should have because they had become complacent and hadn't diversified their client base. They were still relying on the same strategies and the same relationships that I had built, but without me there to maintain them, everything was falling apart. That's when I made my move. The venture capital firm I worked for had given me significant autonomy to identify investment opportunities. When I brought them a proposal to acquire a struggling manufacturing company called Phoenix Industrial Group, they were intrigued. Phoenix was Sterling Industries' biggest competitor, but they had been mismanaged for years and were available for a fraction of their actual value. This could be a gold mine, I told my partners. Industrial manufacturing is about to make a huge comeback, and this company has all the infrastructure and client relationships they need. They just need proper management and strategic investment. What I didn't tell them was that I knew exactly how to turn Phoenix into Sterling Industries' worst nightmare. The acquisition went through in early 2009. We bought Phoenix Industrial Group for $12 million, pocket change for a company that should have been worth $50 million. I was named CEO with full operational control and a significant equity stake. The first thing I did was call every client I had ever worked with at Sterling Industries. Not to poach them. That would have been unethical and probably illegal given my non-compete clause. But my non-compete had expired years earlier, and there's nothing unethical about letting old friends know that you're back in business. The conversations were fascinating. Client after client told me the same story. Sterling Industries wasn't the same company it used to be. The personal service was gone, the attention to detail had disappeared, and they felt like they were just account numbers instead of partners. You know, one client told me, ever since you left Sterling, it's like they stopped caring about our business. We've been looking for someone who understands our needs the way you did. Within 6 months, Phoenix Industrial Group had signed contracts with 8 former Sterling Industries clients. Within a year, we had captured 30% of Sterling Industries' client base. And the best part was, we weren't doing anything underhanded or unethical. We were just providing better service, better prices, and better relationships. But that was just the beginning. Remember how I had learned about finance and investment strategy? Well, I put that knowledge to work in ways that Sterling Industries never saw coming. While they were focused on trying to win back lost clients, I was systematically undermining their entire business model. I knew their supply chain better than they did, so I negotiated exclusive deals with their key suppliers. I knew their pricing structure, so I undercut them in strategic markets while maintaining higher margins than they thought possible. Most importantly, I knew their weaknesses, and I exploited every single one of them. By 2012, Phoenix Industrial Group had grown from a $12 million acquisition to a company worth over $200 million. We were no longer Sterling Industries' competitor, we were their superior in every measurable way. That's when William Sterling called me for the first time in 10 years. "We need to talk," he said, and his voice sounded older and more tired than I remembered. We met at the same restaurant where Sterling Industries used to hold their client dinners. William looked like he had aged 20 years in the past decade. His hair was completely gray, his face was lined with stress, and his hands shook slightly when he picked up his coffee cup. "You've built an impressive company," he said, trying to make small talk. "Thank you," I replied. "It's amazing what you can accomplish when you're properly motivated." He winced at that, understanding the implication. "Look," he said, "I know things ended badly between us. Maybe we made some mistakes. But this war between our companies isn't helping anyone." Well, that was an interesting choice of words. "I'm not at war with Sterling Industries, William," I said calmly. "I'm just running a better business." "Your company is destroying us," he said, and for the first time I could hear desperation in his voice. "We've lost 60% of our client base. We've had to lay off half our workforce. If this continues, Sterling Industries won't exist in 2 years." I took a sip of my coffee and looked at this man who had once promised me golden years. "That's not my problem, William. You made your choice 10 years ago. Now you have to live with the consequences." "What do you want?" he asked bluntly. "Money? An apology? What will it take for you to back off?" What did I want? That was the question I had been asking myself for years. "I want you to understand something," I said. "When you forced me into retirement, you didn't just fire an employee. You created your biggest competitor. Every client I take from you, every contract I win, every dollar I earn, that's all money that should have been yours if you had just treated me with the respect I deserved." William stared at me across the table, and I could see the exact moment when he realized the full scope of what had happened. "You planned this," he whispered. "All of this. From the moment you walked out of my office, you were planning this." I smiled for the first time during our conversation. "William, I didn't plan anything. You did. You planned this the moment you decided that 15 years of loyalty was worth less than David Harrison's office politics." Speaking of David Harrison, you might be wondering what happened to him. Well, that evidence I had given William about David's embezzlement? It turned out to be very useful. David was fired, prosecuted, and spent 18 months in federal prison for fraud. But that's not the best part. The best part is that when he got out, he applied for a job at Phoenix Industrial Group. I had the pleasure of personally rejecting his application. By 2015, Sterling Industries was on the verge of bankruptcy. Their stock price had fallen from $47 per share to less than $3. They had sold off most of their assets and were operating out of a building that was 1/10 the size of their original headquarters. That's when I made my final move. Through a complex financial arrangement involving multiple investment partners and shell companies, I orchestrated the acquisition of Sterling Industries. The purchase price was $15 million, less than what they had paid me in severance and pension benefits 10 years earlier. The irony was perfect. The company that had forced me into early retirement was now owned by the man they had discarded. William Sterling, the CEO who had promised me golden years and then broken that promise, was now working for me. I called a company-wide meeting for my first day as the new owner of Sterling Industries. The handful of employees who remained were nervous and uncertain about what this change meant for their jobs. William Sterling sat in the front row, looking like a man who had seen his entire world collapse. I stood at the front of the same conference room where they had ended my career 15 years earlier and looked out at faces that were a mixture of familiar and new. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "my name is Michael Thompson, and I am your new owner." The silence in that room was deafening. Some of you may remember me from my previous time with this company. For those who don't, let me share a brief history. 15 years ago, I was forced into early retirement from this very company after giving them the best years of my life. I was told it was a restructuring decision, but I knew it was really about office politics and personal agendas. I looked directly at William Sterling as I continued. That decision turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me, though I didn't realize it at the time. It forced me to discover capabilities I never knew I had. It motivated me to learn new skills, take new risks, and build something better than what I had lost. I paused and let that sink in before delivering the line I had been rehearsing for years. Today, Sterling Industries becomes a subsidiary of Phoenix Industrial Group. This company that once discarded me is now owned by me. And I want every single person in this room to understand the lesson in that. The lesson was simple: loyalty should be rewarded, not punished. Employees should be valued, not discarded. And if you choose to treat good people badly, don't be surprised when they come back stronger than ever. But here's the thing that might surprise you. I didn't fire everyone and shut down Sterling Industries out of spite. That would have been the revenge fantasy version of this story, but that's not who I am. Instead, I kept the company running, retained most of the employees, and even gave William Sterling the option to stay on in a consulting role. Because true success isn't about destroying your enemies, it's about rising above the level they operated on. Sterling Industries under my ownership became a model for how companies should treat their employees. Fair compensation, respect for loyalty, and recognition for hard work became the foundation of our corporate culture. Within 3 years, Sterling Industries was profitable again. We had rebuilt the client relationships that had been neglected, modernized the operations that had become outdated, and most importantly, created an environment where employees felt valued and respected. William Sterling chose to retire after 6 months of working for me. On his last day, he came to my office and sat in the same chair where I had once begged him to reconsider my termination. "I owe you an apology," he said simply. "What we did to you 15 years ago was wrong. I let politics and personal relationships cloud my judgment, and I made a decision that hurt a good man who deserved better." I accepted his apology because holding on to anger wasn't serving me anymore. The revenge was complete not because I had destroyed Sterling Industries, but because I had proven that I was better than the people who had wronged me. Today, Phoenix Industrial Group is a Fortune 500 company worth over $800 million. Sterling Industries operates as our primary subsidiary and is more successful now than it ever was under William Sterling's leadership. We employ over 3,000 people across 12 states, and we have a corporate culture built on the principle that loyalty and hard work should always be rewarded. But the real victory isn't in the money or the success or even the satisfaction of proving my former employers wrong. The real victory is in the letters I receive from employees who tell me that working for our companies has changed their lives for the better. It's in the clients who trust us with their biggest projects because they know we'll treat them with respect and deliver on our promises. And it's in the knowledge that when I was backed into a corner and facing the end of my career, I chose to build something better instead of just complaining about how unfair life had been. So here's what I want you to remember from my story. When someone treats you unfairly, when they underestimate you, when they try to discard you like you don't matter, don't let that define you. Let it motivate you. Use it as fuel to become something greater than you ever thought possible. The people who wronged me thought they were ending my story when they forced me into retirement. What they actually did was give me the opening chapter of the greatest comeback in business history. And if you're facing your own Sterling Industries moment right now, remember this. The best revenge isn't getting even. The best revenge is becoming so successful that your former enemies become irrelevant. It's building something so impressive that the people who doubted you have no choice but to respect what you've accomplished. That's the real power of a comeback story. It's not about destruction, it's about transformation. And sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. If this story inspired you to never give up on yourself, even when others have given up on you, then do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you want to hear more stories about people who turned their biggest sets into their greatest comebacks, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Because everyone deserves golden years, my friend. Sometimes you just have to build them yourself. Until next time, remember, your story isn't over until you decide it's over. And the best chapters might be the ones you write after everyone thinks the book is closed. Keep fighting, keep building, and keep proving them wrong.